how long does it take for teammates to kind of turn on someone that is as much of a headache as Antonio Brown seems to be? You mentioned he's not with the Steelers anymore. He's now with the Raiders. It's already drama. The attention's already on him. How long until maybe some of this Raiders locker room is like, can you believe this guy?
You know what? It doesn't take long, and I know every situation's different. It does come down to production.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like everything. Same thing with punishments and guys getting in trouble off the field, and how is there a double standard in some situations? Well, it comes down to production. If he continues to be a diva and this helmet issue lingers on, or there's other things that happen, and his production slips, and they don't get what they think that they should get, then guys are going to start mumbling and, giving the side eye and not respecting him. But if all of a sudden this is just a thing in the rearview mirror and he ends up being an all-pro, he's having an all-pro season, well, then it's like, Antonio being Antonio, and we'll have to deal with that. I think when you look at it from afar, I think they got more problems on the horizon because Derek Carr doesn't seem like a guy to me that's very assertive. He doesn't seem like a Roethlisberger type where he's just going to command the respect in the huddle and command the respect in the locker room. And I feel like AB is going to walk in there and sees an opportunity to sort of be the alpha dog. And I don't think that you want that sort of presence being the alpha dog in the locker room.
Switching dramas, how do you go from being offered $30 million a year to asking for $40 million a year?
It's so random, right? I don't know if obviously a lot of this stuff is agent driven, and there's only a few players that I think that truly get down into the weeds of contracts and comparison contracts, and I'm guessing Dak is taking advice from his agent. His agent has laid it out that says, hey, this is where your stats are. This is how many wins you have. This is the quarterbacks in the league that are making this much money, and we need to command $40 million a year. And he's like, okay, if that's what the numbers say, let's go for it. There's been varying reports on whether that's been true or not, that he specifically has been asking for it. Now it sounds like more and more that he did okay that sort of ask from his agent. Again, going back to AB's situation, every situation is different. And when it comes to contracts, I know that quarterbacks get the benefit of the doubt because, hey, they're quarterbacks. There's only a few of them that can play at a high level. I don't think that Dak certainly is a $40 million a year player. I think he's barely a $30 million player. He needs a running game. They need Zeke more than they need Dak, and he can say that he's a franchise quarterback all he wants. But I think if you watch the games, there's not a ton of quarterbacking going on. There's a one or two reads, and the ball doesn't come out, and he's going to scramble around and make some plays because he's athletic. But as far as really leading your team to a Super Bowl, I just don't see it out of Dak.
With Ben Leber, former Vikings and Chargers linebacker, you touched on it there. Like, we live in the day and age, Ben, where the running back is just not considered as important to an offense as he used to be. And yet I can't, for the life of me, figure out how good Dak Prescott is. On the flip side of the coin, it is so difficult to acquire a quarterback of good consequence that when you have one, even if you're not entirely sure he's upper tier, you've got to lock him in, right?
Yeah, I feel like that's been Joe Flacco's situation for a long time. I think everybody realizes that he's not really an elite quarterback, but yet he's productive, and you don't want to start over, and you start looking at free agents and the draft classes, and you're like, well, he's probably better than those guys, but he's not like elite, and
Yeah.
And they continue to pay him, and I get that he's got Super Bowl cred, but I think talent-wise and skill-wise, you look at a guy like that and say, like, he's okay. He's an above-average quarterback that needs some pieces around him, and let's concentrate on getting those pieces around him. And I feel like Dak is the same way. And unfortunately, in the NFL, there's probably only 11, 12 quarterbacks that I think you can legitimately say these are upper-tier elite quarterbacks. Outside of that, people are just they're always sort of looking. And if they have one guy that's average, you get into that pickle of, do we start all over again?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've built all this team and these pieces and offense and defense, and do we just scrap this and go with a rookie quarterback? Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
There's two problems with Dak Prescott's game. First and foremost, he gets hit too many times, and that's not conducive to long-term success. He's going to get injured. If he gets injured and hurts his legs, his mobility suffers, and then he becomes even more of a liability as a pocket passer. Additionally, there's a fake narrative surrounding him that he can bring the Cowboys back from these deficits, which is something that he did in his first year, but over the last 2 years has not been that successful. So I'm with you on that one. I don't think he's worth 40. 30 might even be a stretch given the sample size recently. But moving on to a team closer to you, what are your thoughts on Kirk Cousins and kind of where he stands on this quarterback hierarchy?
Well, I definitely think that he's a top 10 quarterback, and his stats would show that. But he knows that he needs to step it up when it comes to leadership. When it comes to just letting it go. And I think just going back to having fun. And he has all the mechanics down. He's a very polished passer and a very polished player. But as we all know, there's a little something extra that the elite quarterbacks have, a little bit more of a moxie that they have. And I think he's working on that. He's working on bringing that out, and he's shown that a little bit more in practice. He's verbally been much more of that in the offseason, appearing on a bunch of radio shows, just trying to let the public see his true personality, that he's not just this sort of robotic quarterback. And I think a lot of it's paying off already. And you couple that with a change in the offensive philosophy, allowing him to maybe get on the edge a little bit more, allowing him to distribute the ball to more of the receivers, more targets, I think is really going to help him have a huge season. So it's been quite the transformation around here in the Twin Cities of just sort of watching Kirk Cousins come in, have a lot of this expectation. And I think that he kind of buckled a little bit under that expectation. And now I think he's just like a wet dog, just shaking all that stuff off of him and trying to start fresh this new in 2019.
It's funny that you mentioned he's working on his leadership and being more assertive, because those are some qualities that I would expect to hear from a quarterback that maybe hasn't been with the same team since he was 24. You know what I mean? Someone who's more of a journeyman and you're trying to find your position within new teams. Yep. But he's been with the same franchise up until last year for a long time. So that's super interesting to me.
Well, I think for him, too, it's about just not being afraid to make mistakes. The fan base here in Minnesota, although Brett Favre was only here for 2 years, they loved him because it's Brett Favre, but he brought that playground mentality, and I don't think that the fans cared about his mistakes as much because of the potential playmaking ability that he had. And same thing with Case Keenum. You know, they loved Case Keenum for just the 1 year that he was here because he brought an element of fun. He brought an element of a little bit of danger, which was kind of exciting. And yes, he wasn't super polished. You'd probably never have Case Keenum go to an elite quarterback camp in the NFL and say, like, okay, this is how you quarterback in the NFL. He just gets it done. Mm-hmm. And you look at Baker Mayfield, and he's a little bit of the same thing. You know, he's a little bit of rough around the edges, but he brings a spark, he brings an excitement, he brings leadership. I think Kirk has to get back to the fact of, don't worry about making mistakes. Don't worry about throwing an interception. Just do it 100 miles an hour and be creative and be a little bit off schedule. And if things aren't going right, just make a play. And it doesn't have to be drawn up perfectly in the playbook. And you're starting to see a little bit more of that creativity and vulnerability in practice. And, he looked great in the 8 plays in the first game.
Always great to chat, Ben. Thanks so much. We'll do it again soon.
Hey, no problem, guys. Anytime.
Bye,
Ben Leber, former Vikings and Chargers linebacker, NFL and college football analyst.